Somewhere online right now, someone in full pink, lashes done, voice breathy and sweet, is
Not your
explaining that
bank
you should
account.
only
Would have
worry
loved
about
being
what you can
unbothered.
control. People are calling it a joke. It is not a joke. There's a trend right now called Bimbo Stoicism. And if you haven't seen it, here's roughly how it goes. Someone presents in an aesthetic built entirely around being soft, decorative, hyper feminine, glamorous in the most maximalist sense. Big hair, long lashes, pink everything. And in that same breath, with total sincerity, they're talking about radical acceptance, indifference to other people's opinions, and focusing only on what's actually within their control. The internet finds this funny, mostly because it doesn't expect those two things to occupy the same person. The aesthetic says one thing, the content says another, and somewhere in that gap between the look and the message, people laugh. But look at what the trend is actually doing once you strip away the comedy. The core practice is consistent across nearly every version of it. Someone gets criticized online, the kind of comment designed to wound, about their appearance, their intelligence, their choices, and instead of defending themselves, explaining themselves, or getting visibly hurt, the response is calm, almost serene. Something like, "That's just like your opinion, and your opinion isn't my problem." That line gets repeated so often inside the trend, it's become a kind of mantra. It sounds breezy. It sounds almost too simple to be real philosophy. It is almost word for word the entire foundation of Stoic practice. The dichotomy of control, the idea that some things are within your power, your judgments, your responses, your choices, and some things are not. Other people's opinions, their judgments, what they decide to think of you. Confusing the two is where suffering lives. Bimbo Stoicism didn't invent this. It rediscovered it, packaged it in glitter, and started repeating it to millions of people who would never pick up a philosophy book. Here's the part that makes this more than a meme. Researchers who study how people perceive each other have identified something called the warmth versus competence trade-off. People who present as conventionally feminine, soft, or decorative are reflexively coded by observers as less competent automatically before any actual reasoning is evaluated. It's not a conscious decision anyone makes. It's a snap judgment baked into how perception works, which means the trend isn't just borrowing Stoic language for comedic effect. It's running a live demonstration of exactly the bias the philosophy is talking about. People assume the aesthetic and the substance can't coexist, laugh at the apparent contradiction, and in doing so prove the entire point the trend is making without realizing it. The practice itself breaks down into a few repeating moves once you watch enough of it. First, the radical acceptance of things you cannot change. Your body today. The fact that someone online is being cruel, the reality of a bad day, no fighting it, no spiraling about it, just acknowledging it exists and isn't yours to control. Second, the total redirection of attention toward what is actually yours. Your own response, your own mood, your own next 5 minutes. Bimbo Stoicism reframes this constantly as choosing your vibe, but the mechanism underneath that phrase is identical to choosing your judgments, which is the oldest Stoic instruction there is. Third, and this is the part most people miss because it's delivered with a giggle instead of a lecture, the explicit refusal to let outside judgment determine internal state. Someone calls you stupid online. The Bimbo Stoic response isn't to argue back and prove them wrong. It's closer to, that's an opinion happening in someone else's head, and it has no actual access to mine. That response only sounds absurd if you've already decided the person saying it isn't capable of meaning it. Imagine stripping away everything except the judgment. No pink, no lashes, no glitter, no voice. Just the sentence, "Your opinion isn't my problem." Suddenly it sounds less like internet comedy and more like something that could have been spoken on a stone bench 2,000 years ago. Then put the glitter back. Notice what changed. Not the philosophy, only the clothes. To understand where this actually comes from, it helps to know that Stoicism was never built by people with comfortable lives defending comfortable positions. One of its most influential teachers, Epictetus, was born into slavery, had his leg permanently broken by his own master, and was later exiled from Rome entirely for refusing to soften his teaching. He built an entire philosophy specifically for people whose external circumstances offered them nothing. Status, health, freedom. None of it was his. So he built his whole framework around the one thing nobody could take, his own judgment about how to respond to what happened to him. He would have recognized Bimbo Stoicism immediately, not as a joke, but as the exact same move he made 2,000 years earlier. Strip away every external marker of why you're not supposed to be taken seriously, and discover that none of it was ever actually load-bearing for your character in the first place. The trend gets dismissed because it arrives wrapped in glitter instead of a toga. But wisdom has never depended on its wardrobe. The sentence does not become less true because someone wearing rhinestones says it. Gravity does not stop working because the person describing it is wearing pink. The substance underneath is identical. Indifference to judgment you cannot control. Total ownership over the one thing you actually can. You didn't laugh at the philosophy, you laughed at the outfit. And somewhere in Nicopolis 2,000 years ago, a man with a permanently broken leg had already built an entire way of living around the idea that other people's opinions never belonged to him in the first place. Maybe every generation thinks it knows what wisdom looks like. If the same words can sound profound from one person and ridiculous from another, how often are you judging the truth by the person saying it? That's a question worth sitting with.